The sterile stillness of Memorial Hospital's pediatric ICU shattered in a split second. One moment, everything was calm. The quiet beeping of machines, the low murmur of nurses at the station, and the rhythmic sighs of ventilators. Then came the thunder of claws against tile. A blur of tan and black muscle burst through the automatic doors. Max, the 70-pound German shepherd with a past forged in law enforcement, launched into the room with singular intent. His claws scraped against the floor. His amber eyes locked on one man, Dr. Thomas Reynolds. The doctor didn't have time to react. 1 second he was adjusting the settings on a nearby machine. The next he was staggering backward as Max collided with him, the syringe flying from his hand, spinning in slow motion before crashing to the ground. "Get this animal out of here," Dr. Reynolds shouted, panic fraying his voice as Max latched onto the sleeve of his pristine white coat, dragging him away from the ventilator with surprising control. Nurses screamed. Alarms blared. Security was called. It was chaos. But in the middle of that storm, Max wasn't panicking. He wasn't confused. He wasn't out of control. He was focused on Emma. 7-year-old Emma Bennett lay motionless in her hospital bed, her golden hair fanned. Around her pale face, an oxygen tube feeding her breath. 14 days had passed since she collapsed without warning at her elementary school. 14 days since she'd opened her eyes, spoken her last word, smiled her last smile. Doctors were baffled. An unexplained neurotoxic response, they called. Doios, possibly environmental, maybe psychological. But Max didn't buy any of it. When Dr. Reynolds reached for Emma's oxygen line, Max reacted. Not like a pet, like a soldier following orders. Like a guardian fulfilling a promise. The hospital administration called it an incident. The media would later call it a mauling. But what the security footage revealed, a hidden angle above Emma's bed, would leave even the most skeptical. Viewers breathless. The dog hadn't attacked, he had intervened. Within hours, questions began swirling. Who was Dr. Reynolds, really? Why was Emma targeted? What had she seen? What had she found that made her a threat? And how did Max know? This isn't just a story about a loyal dog or a mysterious illness. It's a story about a town with two faces. A mother caught between grief and intuition. A girl who stumbled upon a deadly secret. And a dog who remembered the final command of a fallen partner. Protect them, no matter what. If you're watching this from a quiet place somewhere safe, remember, even the calmest waters can hide the deadliest currents. What happened at Memorial Hospital was just the beginning, because behind the soft bark of a guardian was a vow, and Max was just getting started. Oakwood Falls looked like it had been plucked straight from a postcard. A storybook town, nestled between whispering pine forests and winding country roads, where 4th of July parades still passed beneath a canopy of red, white, and blue bunting, and the gazebo in the Central Park hosted community concerts under starry skies. Visitors described it as charming. Locals called it home. But beneath the charm, shadows stirred. Kate Bennett knew both faces of Oakwood Falls. By day, she wore the scrubs of a trauma nurse at Memorial Hospital. By night, she lay awake wondering what truths her late husband, James, had taken to his grave. She had walked the sterile halls of the hospital for 15 years, stitching wounds and comforting families. She had seen the damage behind closed doors, the bruises, the broken bones, the overdoses swept under small-town rugs. She had also seen miracles. Babies' first cries, heartbeats restored, lives saved by inches. At 38, grief had made her older than her years. James had died 3 years ago in what the department called a routine patrol gone wrong. Shot during a robbery, they said. Wrong place, wrong time. But even then, even through the fog of loss, something hadn't felt right. James had always been cautious, precise. His partner, Noah Parker, had been the one to tell her, stoic, efficient, cold. She never asked if Noah believed the official story. Maybe she didn't want to know the answer. Only Emma kept her anchored. 4 years old at the time, Emma had been too young to grasp what death really meant, but old enough to feel the hole it left behind. The days following the funeral were a blur of casseroles, sympathy cards, and muffled sobs behind closed doors. It wasn't Kate who got her out of bed in the morning. It was Max. Max had been James's K-9 partner. After the shooting, he'd refused to leave James's side until the coroner arrived. The department offered to retire him early, and Kate didn't hesitate. Max had come home with them, and from the moment he laid eyes on Emma, his mission was clear. He became her shadow, her sentinel, her constant. He waited outside her bedroom door every night, walked her to the bus stop each morning, sat beside her during doctor visits and school plays, unmoving, unmoved. He thinks she's his responsibility now, Noah had once remarked, during one of his increasingly infrequent visits. James used to say Max had better instincts than most humans. Not everyone in Oakwood Falls was dangerous. Some, like Dr. Sarah Mitchell, had been Emma's pediatrician since birth and had fought alongside Kate to allow Max into the hospital room. Animal companions can improve outcomes in comatose patients, she told the board. This isn't superstition. It's science. Others, like Mayor Caldwell, made Kate's skin crawl. He had shaken her hand at James's funeral, eyes wet, with rehearsed sympathy. Later, he'd shown up at the hospital with a teddy bear for Emma. "Anything you need," he had said, clasping her hand between both of his. Max had growled. Caldwell had excused himself with a chuckle, but Kate hadn't forgotten the way Max's hackles rose, nor had she forgotten the picture in the hospital lobby. Caldwell's confident smile beneath a plaque commemorating the pediatric wing renovation, funded by his own family foundation. Beneath the glassy charm and patriotic pride, something festered. In Oakwood Falls, Kate returned to Emma's room after a brief coffee run to find Principal Victoria Winters speaking to a nurse. Her face brightened the moment she noticed Kate. "I just came by with some cards from Emma's classmates," she said, holding out a colorful folder. "Everyone at Jefferson Elementary is praying for her." Kate accepted the folder with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something about the principal's visits always felt off. Too eager, too watchful. Max seemed to agree. He never let her get too close to Emma. James had taught Kate to trust Max's instincts. That teaching was starting to feel more like prophecy. The morning Emma collapsed had been utterly ordinary. She'd chattered at the breakfast table about her science project, a model of the solar system. "I want to get Jupiter's red spot just right," she'd said, using James's old magnifying glass. "I want it to be perfect." Max had lain at her feet, nudging her for ear scratches. "Mom, can I put Daddy's picture in my project folder?" she'd asked, spooning cereal. "Mr. Wilson said we could personalize them." Kate had frozen. "Which picture?" "The one of him and Max getting their award. I found it in that box in your closet." Kate remembered the cold splash of coffee on her hand. That box had been placed high, out of Emma's reach. "Did you look at anything else?" Emma had shrugged. "Just some pictures in Daddy's notebook. The one with the little key." Before Kate could press further, the bus honked. That was the last conversation they'd had. By lunchtime, Emma was in a coma, and Max's mission had just begun. It began like any other Tuesday. Kate braided Emma's golden hair, while her daughter chatted excitedly about her upcoming science presentation. The model of the solar system she'd spent the past week crafting stood proudly on the kitchen table. 9 styrofoam planets strung on wire, each carefully painted. Emma had been particularly obsessed with Jupiter. "It has the great red spot," she'd explained with the wide-eyed seriousness only a 7-year-old could muster. "It's a storm bigger than Earth." Max lay by her feet, occasionally nudging, her elbow for attention. "Do you think Daddy would like it?" she asked. Kate had frozen mid-sip of her coffee. "I think he'd be very proud," she'd said softly. "Can I put his picture in my folder?" "The one with Max and the award?" Kate hesitated. "Where did you find that?" "In your closet. In the box," Emma said. "There was a notebook, too, the one with the little key." Kate felt her stomach drop. That key, the one James used, to wear around his neck, was missing when they returned his personal effects. The notebook had always been locked. She hadn't dared open it. Before she could ask more, the school bus honked. "Love you, Mom." And then she was gone. By 12:47 p.m., Kate was standing in the hospital corridor, staring through a window at her daughter lying deathly still. "She just collapsed," Emma's teacher, Miss Collins, said. 1 second she was eating lunch. "Then not a seizure, sir." We called 911 immediately. There had been no warning, nothing unusual in her diet, no allergies, just sudden, violent convulsions. The EMTs had stabilized her on the way, but Emma hadn't woken up. The first 24 hours were a blur of medical jargon and running shoes squeaking across the linoleum. Unexplained neurotoxic reaction, nonspecific inflammation, possible anaphylaxis. But nothing definitive, and nothing Kate, with all her experience, could explain. She went home briefly that night, only to be met with Max's howls echoing through the empty house. He scratched at Emma's bedroom door, whined when she didn't answer. The next morning he refused to eat. It was Noah Parker who brought him to the hospital. He tore up the back door trying to get out. He told Kate, "He needs to see her." Max's arrival was like flipping a switch. He charged through the pediatric wing with focused urgency, ignoring nurses' shouts and security's confusion. When he reached Emma's bedside, he paused, sniffed her hand, then lay down beside her with a deep, almost mournful sigh. And the monitors changed. Flat EEG lines twitched. Brain activity climbed. Not dramatically, but undeniably. Nurses exchanged glances. Dr. Mitchell ordered a repeat scan. "Keep him here," she told the administrators. "Whatever rules you have, this is working." So they made an exception. Kate slept in a recliner. Max never left the floor. 14 days passed. Emma didn't move, but her reading slowly improved, only when Max was present. Kate tried to trace back everything Emma had touched, eaten, carried. When she returned to school to collect Emma's things, she was told the desk had already been cleared. "We thought it would be less painful for you," Principal Winters said, handing her an empty backpack. "You shouldn't have to deal with the reminders." But something in her tone felt rehearsed. When Kate got home, she went straight to the box in the closet. Everything seemed untouched, until she noticed a few photos missing, and the notebook. It was there. But the key wasn't. That night, she cried into Max's fur. "What did she find?" she whispered. "What did you see?" The next morning, she found muddy footprints on the back porch. Things spiraled quickly. A new Dr. Reynolds appeared on Emma's case, claiming to be a specialist from Boston. His credentials checked out. His presence didn't. Max growled. Every time he entered the room, Kate began keeping a journal. She recorded who entered and when, what was adjusted, how Emma responded. A pattern emerged. Dr. Reynolds, Principal Winters, and a mysterious orderly Max didn't trust. "You're being paranoid," Noah told her over the phone. "Maybe," she said, "but Max isn't." Then came the moment that shattered everything. Kate had stepped away briefly to speak with Dr. Mitchell. 5 minutes, no more. She returned to alarms, screaming. Max had pinned Dr. Reynolds against the wall, teeth locked on his coat. A syringe lay shattered on the floor. A clear liquid pooled across the tiles. Emma's oxygen tube was disconnected. Security pulled Max away. Reynolds accused him of attacking a physician, demanded the dog be put down. But Kate had seen the monitors. She demanded the security footage. She and Dr. Mitchell reviewed it together. It showed everything. Reynolds entering, checking Emma's chart, glancing at the door, reaching not to adjust, but to disconnect, and Max, silent, waiting, exploding into action the second Reynolds touched the tube. He wasn't attacking, Kate whispered. He was protecting her. The hospital began an internal investigation. Reynolds vanished before questions could be asked. And then Kate received a text from an unknown number. Check Emma's backpack, front pocket, destroy after reading. Inside was a photo, just a fragment. A man's hand, a distinctive watch, and a note. Your daughter found what her father died for. They're watching your house. Trust no one. Kate sat in the hospital cafeteria, a foam cup of coffee going cold in her hands. Her eyes stared through the plastic lid, unfocused, her mind whirling. What had Emma found? What had James hidden that was so dangerous? It led to his death, and now threatened their daughter's life. The image of Max lunging at Dr. Reynolds was seared into her memory. That wasn't rage. It wasn't fear. It was precision. Purpose. The exact same kind of movement James had once described during training drills. Max wasn't just reacting. He was intervening, and Reynolds hadn't stayed to clear his name. He'd vanished. Kate returned to Emma's room to find Max curled beside the bed once more, his eyes watchful. She sat down and stroked his fur slowly, letting the repetitive motion calm her racing thoughts. Then she remembered the note. Check Emma's backpack, front pocket. The backpack had seemed empty before, but now, guided by desperation, Kate inspected it thoroughly. In the inner lining of the front pocket, nearly invisible beneath the seams, she found it. A folded piece of glossy paper. A torn photograph. It showed part of a man's torso, black suit, pale hand gripping a metallic object. The edge of a familiar watch caught the light. Her breath caught. Mayor Caldwell, she knew that watch. It had been featured in a local magazine article. He wore it constantly. Next to the photo was a tiny folded note, the handwriting unfamiliar. Your daughter found what her father died for. They're watching your house. Trust no one. Kate's hands trembled. She turned to Max. You knew. You always knew. That evening, Noah Parker appeared in Emma's doorway. His face was carefully neutral, but Max immediately rose and stood guard. Not aggressive, just alert. I heard about the incident, Noah said. Reynolds isn't in our system. Credentials verified through hospital channels only. Kate hesitated, then made a decision. She pulled the photo from her pocket and handed it to him. This was in Emma's bag. She must have hidden it. Noah examined it, eyes narrowing. That's Caldwell. This looks like a weapon. Kate told him everything. The notebook, the missing key, the disturbed box, the muddy footprints. Noah's jaw clenched. We need to talk somewhere private. He returned 15 minutes later with a small black device. White noise generator. Creates interference. We have 3 minutes. And then, in a hushed, urgent voice, he told her the truth. James hadn't died in a robbery gone wrong. He had uncovered evidence of systemic corruption, money laundering, drug trafficking, abuse of power, and he'd begun building a case, a RICO-level investigation. But he never got the chance to deliver it, Noah said. He called me the night before he died, said he had what we needed. Then he went dark. Kate's breath hitched. You've known this whole time? I suspected. But I didn't have proof. Until now. She showed him the note, the photograph. Emma found something. That's why they went after her. Max remained at Kate's feet, watching Noah with careful eyes. When the detective reached for the items, Max didn't flinch, didn't growl. He trusts you, Kate said softly. James said Max was the best judge of character he'd ever met. Noah packed the items carefully. I need to get this to my contact in the bureau. If it's real, they'll move fast. Witness protection, immediate custody of evidence. Kate stared at her daughter. And what happens to Emma? She becomes the most important witness in a federal investigation. The next morning, Kate left Emma's side for the first time in days. She told the nurses she needed to get clean clothes. Max whined but stayed behind with Nurse Jenny, one of the few people he tolerated. At home, Kate found everything seemingly untouched, but she knew what to look for now. In Emma's room, she studied the solar system project. Jupiter's great red spot had been painted meticulously, too perfectly. She peeled back a thin layer of paint. Underneath was the rest of the photograph. Mayor Caldwell. A warehouse in the background, a crate with military-style markings. Kate's heart pounded. She checked Bear, Emma's old stuffed toy. One paw had been restitched. Inside, wrapped in gauze, was a small key on a broken chain. and a tiny USB drive. She fled the house. A car was parked down the street. She didn't recognize it. Back at the hospital, she gave Noah the key and drive. That evening, a quiet knock at Emma's door heralded his return. "We're in," he said simply. "The Bureau is launching a full case. We have to move quickly." Before Kate could respond, Dr. Mitchell entered, pale. "Wilson has scheduled Emma's transfer to County General. Ambulance is en route. I tried to stall it. No cameras at County," Noah muttered. "They want her isolated." Kate's spine stiffened. "Then we don't let her go," Max growled low. Someone was coming. A fake orderly arrived minutes later, demanding Kate leave to sign forms. Max stood in front of Emma's bed, unmoving. When the man reached for his pocket, Kate drew Noah's backup gun from beneath the blanket. "Step back." So, man hesitated, then lunged. Max exploded into motion. Chaos erupted. The syringe hit the ground. The man screamed. Max's teeth clamped down. Dr. Mitchell hit the emergency call button. Security stormed in, and as they subdued the intruder, Emma's monitor spiked. Her hand twitched. Her eyes fluttered. "She's waking up," someone whispered. In the middle of the storm, Max returned to Emma's side and gently pressed his nose into her hand. Her fingers curled around his fur. She was coming back, and the truth was coming with her. The hospital's pediatric ICU was under lockdown. After the failed attack by the fake orderly, the FBI had moved swiftly. Agents in dark suits set up outside Emma's room, credentials flashing. Administrator Wilson's protests were drowned out by orders from federal command. The man who had tried to inject Emma, Marcus Reynolds, was cuffed and taken into custody. But the damage had been done. Emma had nearly died. Again. And Max had saved her. Again. Now every heartbeat felt like borrowed time. Kate sat at Emma's bedside, Max curled against her daughter's legs. The child's hand was still weak. Her breathing labored without the ventilator, but she was conscious. Aware. She remembered. The whispered words that followed chilled Kate's blood. "The picture. It's in Jupiter," Emma had murmured. "I hit it, in the red spot." Dr. Mitchell had called it miraculous, but Kate knew better. It wasn't a miracle. It was Emma's will, her instinct to protect. Just like her father, Noah returned that evening with news. "They found it," he said, placing an evidence bag on the table. Inside was the Jupiter model, the red spot carefully scraped away, revealing the full photograph beneath. Mayor Caldwell, clearly visible. A man beside him, Marcus Reynolds, holding a weapon over a prone figure. James. And it wasn't just the photo. There had been an audio recorder embedded in the model's base. The voices were clear, Caldwell giving the order. Reynolds accepting it. It was enough. "They moved on Caldwell an hour ago," Noah said. "He's in custody. Principal Winters tried to flee, caught at the county line. Wilson's already talking." Kate felt her knees give. She dropped into the chair beside Emma and whispered, "It's over. We did it." Max lifted his head. His amber eyes met hers. Not relaxed. Not yet. The next morning, Agent Diana Fletcher from the U.S. Marshals arrived. Petite, composed, efficient. She laid out the plan in blunt terms. "Your daughter is a key witness in a federal case," she said. "She will be under threat until trial concludes. We're recommending witness protection. New identities. New home. New life." Kate looked at Emma, then at Max. "I won't leave him," she said. "He's part of this family." Fletcher nodded. "Given the circumstances, we'll make it work." Preparations began immediately. Documentation, relocation logistics, safety protocols. The hospital stay would end in secrecy. Max, however, sensed something wrong long before the humans did. That night, as the hospital quieted, Emma slept peacefully for the first time. Kate sat by the window, watching the parking lot below. Max wouldn't rest. He paced. He growled softly at every sound in the hallway. At 2:13 a.m., it happened. A crash. Shouting. Gunshots. Kate grabbed the panic button. Max was already up, snarling. The door burst open. Marcus Reynolds, bloodied, wild-eyed, and holding a stolen firearm, stepped into the room. "This ends now," he snarled, pointing the gun at Emma. Kate moved without thinking, shielding her. Daughter with her body, and Max launched. It was a blur of teeth and fury. The gun discharged once, into the ceiling. Max's weight crashed into Reynolds, taking him down. The weapon skittered across the floor. Federal agents stormed in seconds later, dragging Reynolds away. Max stood over Emma, panting, fur bloody. But eyes fierce. Emma opened her eyes. "Max," she whispered, "you kept your promise." Later, as dawn broke over Oakwood Falls, Kate sat with Emma in her arms. Max lay at their feet, finally calm. The FBI had everything they needed. Caldwell and his ring would be dismantled. Emma was safe, for now. But the cost had been high, and their journey wasn't over yet. Emma's attack had proven how far corruption could reach, how desperate, powerful men could become when the truth threatened to surface. The hospital had become a battlefield, and Max had stood alone against it, twice. In the aftermath, the ICU was transformed. The FBI swept through every inch. Emma's room was relocated. Security tripled. Reporters camped outside the hospital gates, unaware of the full story. Max was examined by a vet and cleared of injury. But the graying around his muzzle had grown. He moved slower now, still strong, still alert, but tired. Kate watched him with aching gratitude. She had once believed James was the family's protector, and he had been, but it was Max who had carried that duty through fire, betrayal, and blood. A week later, Fletcher returned. "Clearance is in. We're moving you tomorrow." Kate nodded. She didn't ask where. She didn't need to. Home was wherever Emma and Max were. That night, Max curled at Emma's feet once more. Her hand reached down, fingers tangling in his thick fur. "Daddy said you'd protect me," she whispered. "And you did." The dog didn't move, but his eyes gleamed in the dark. Watching, always watching. Tomorrow they would vanish. A new name, a new beginning. But Max would remain the same, loyal, relentless, unbreakable. 16 months later, the sun rose over a quiet suburban street where the leaves were just beginning to turn. Emma Bennett, now Emily Miller to everyone who knew her, played in the fenced backyard with an aging German shepherd. The dogs. Gait was slower, his muzzle more silver than sable, but his eyes still watched her like she was the center of the world. Max. To the neighbors, they were just a mother and daughter who'd moved from out of state after losing a husband and father to cancer. Kate, now Karen, worked part-time as a nurse. Emma went to school. Life resumed in small, quiet ways. But behind their front door, the truth lived. They were survivors, witnesses, a family built on love, loss, and the loyalty of a dog who had once brought a murderer to his knees. Inside their home, tucked in a drawer no one opened, was a folded newspaper clipping. Former mayor sentenced to life without parole. Caldwell convicted in murder, racketeering case. The article said it all. Emma's testimony, alongside the evidence Max had protected, had dismantled a criminal empire. Her name, of course, had never appeared in the news. Her story was sealed. Her voice protected. But those who mattered knew. FBI agents had come and gone. Agent Fletcher had visited one last time, paperwork in hand. "You're released from witness protection," she'd said. "You're free." Kate had held back tears. They'd traded one identity for another, but they hadn't lost themselves. They'd simply survived. Quietly. Bravely. Emma still kept Bear on her bed. Max still checked every room before bedtime. Some things hadn't changed, and sometimes, just before sleep, Emma whispered into Max's fur, "You promised Daddy, and you kept it." Max never responded, but he didn't need to. He was watching, waiting. Kate had begun writing again, not nursing reports, but stories, real ones, about sacrifice, about courage, about a dog who saved a little girl when no one else believed she was in danger. The manuscript sat on her desk. No title yet, but the dedication was already written. For James, for Max, For those who see the danger before the rest of us even. Notice the storm. Emma's scars would never fully fade. But she smiled more now, she laughed. She asked about going back to Oakwood Falls someday. Kate didn't say yes. But she didn't say no either, because justice had been served, and healing had begun. But somewhere in the ashes of what Caldwell had built, there were still unanswered questions, unnamed collaborators, shadows that hadn't yet stepped into the light, and if danger ever returned, Max would be ready to be continued.